record the class. All right, super. So let's share. Let's share. All right. All right. So today we are going to be learning about testing React applications. We've done testing before. We did testing way back in when we were doing Node, where we used Mocha and Chai. Gottfried, why do we want to test our code?
Just to ensure the quality of it. And if you test early on, then you don't have to, I forgot what the term is, but you don't have to retest old things.
Yeah.
Regressive testing or something like that.
Yeah, regression sucks.
Yeah.
Regression is where a bug that you thought was fixed comes back and haunts you. That happens way more often than any of us would like. All right, so let me see what does. So let's talk a little bit about the tools we're going to use. So we could use Mocha and Chai, but there are actually better options available to us. So the first thing here, let me open up the app that I'm going to demo on. Okay. Wow, those walkthroughs seem to be new. All right. So this is a standard Create React app. I've actually did something ahead of time, so you'll have a look at the app later. But along with Create React app, we get a number of things for free. Create React app's kind of like the magic wand that you wave, and all of a sudden you have a React app that you can start coding on. And one of the things that Create React app gives us is Jest. So first thing you're going to note is that you don't see anything called Jest in the dependencies or, yeah, dependencies. So just be aware that Jest is in the app. It is hidden behind this thing called React scripts, which is why I say it's a little bit of magic. So Jest is very much like Mocha. You write tests that look very similar to Mocha tests, and you can run them and do the same sorts of things that we learned about a long time ago. So we're going to use Jest because it's built in, and the way we're going to do it is with this test script right here. So let's actually start off, and I happen to know ahead of time that this script is going to fail, or this test is going to fail. So the way we run our tests is npm test. And there we go. So it's failed. This is pretty cool, and it gives us some good information. This is a test that fails. So it's saying renders learn React link. Okay, render the app, find a link element, something with the text learn React. Now, I removed the learn React text from this app. So let's just come over here. Let's see what's in the header. I think, all right, let's look for this string right here. Let's change our test to be that string. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this And I can't do that there. I have to do it here. Okay. By the way, notice that this isn't a string. This is what's called a regex. What a regex is a sort of way to match a pattern, right? So this is going to match the pattern Moai axe tree. It doesn't have to be a regex. I can turn it into a string just by getting rid of those slashes. All right, and my test passes. So we know that this, and here, let's renders, here we go. Because it's not a link, so we just renders there. Okay, super. Notice, by the way, that when I started the tests, it didn't run once and then stop. I didn't have to set up watching, just by default watches. However, it's, yeah. So let's get a little bit more detail. Jest is great, but it also doesn't give us a lot of information. So renders Moai axe tree. Okay, so let's make this a verbose test. And the way we can do that, and I should show you that if I come back to the package JSON, if I try and run here, let's open a new terminal. No, we'll do that. There we go. So if I try and run Jest, it's going to say, I don't know what Jest is. And that's because it's a binary within the node modules. I also can't run, what is it? React scripts test. That last time I tried this just didn't work. And there we go. Again, this is because of the way that Create React App is set up. It knows when you go through Create React App that it's looking for the React App script, and then it passes on the command to that script. Okay, so I want to actually have more information.
John?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a difference between saying npm run test and just npm test?
No, I don't think so. Let's give it a go. Okay. Nope, there is no difference.
Roger.
I always type run, A, because I've always done it that way. B, because it doesn't work for every single command. For instance, this build command, I can't run np. Now I want to check npm build. Is that going to work? Aha, there we go. So you actually have to put run sometimes and not other times. So I just put it in all the time because then I don't have to worry about it. So let's change the script. So I want to pass in a flag. And we've seen flags before, right? So I want to pass in a flag that is --test, or sorry, not test, verbose, which is just a very long way of saying long-winded. So I want to run this, but I want to have verbose output from the testing script. So let's try it again. And it says it's verbose. Oh, you know what's happening? It's not passing it directly to npm. And I'll tell you why. It's because it thinks when I add this verbose flag to the end of the React scripts, or here, actually, npm test --verbose. Yeah, it thinks that I'm passing it to NPM directly, which I'm not. So what I could put verbose in here. What else can I do? I can also put in, if I'm running it from the command line, this is one of those weird things that NPM has. I could put dash dash space dash dash verbose, and will give me verbose output from the test runner. You'll also notice that it gives you commands on everything that you can do. By default, it will rerun only the files that you have, or the tests on the files that you have updated since the last time. So when you save the file, it will run. So go to the header, we got moai axe tree. I'm just going to put an exclamation mark so it will fail. It failed. Get rid of it, save it, and it passes again. So if you are using Yarn, you don't have to worry about that double dash dash thing. But I've never run into this problem myself, but it's in my list, so I'm telling you about it. Okay, so let's have a look at this app that I have here, because, all right, Holly, you can tell me, what's a moai? Holly is quickly Googling. Moai is one of those cool looking statues from Easter Island.
Oh, it's not a term?
It is not a technical term.
Oh, I could have answered that then.
There we go. You thought, oh, you knew it was a statue from Easter Island?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. You should have just said that. In any case, let's npm start. Nico, now you've got me thinking every time I type npm, do I type run or not? And you're messing me up, man. Okay, oh, I'm running, so let's just run it on a new port, it doesn't matter. Okay, and here we've got the most amazing app that you have ever seen. This is the same as rock, paper, scissors, but the guy who created this app, one of the other instructors, decided that he wanted to call it Moai Axe Tree, and all of these are emojis. So the code is full of emoji. So let's have a look at this. I can choose something, and I know I can change my choice, but the robot over here can't change its choice. So we want to add some functionality to this app, and we're going to use test-driven development in order to do that. Sean, what's test-driven development?
Sorry, I was just unmuting there.
Okay, all good.
It's just as you're implementing functionality, you're running tests to make sure that everything you're implementing is working step by step.
Yeah, you want to, you have a goal in mind when you're programming. You want to have certain output for certain input. In this case, we want the computer to choose something random when we choose something random, and then I don't win all the time just by clicking tree, or lose all the time by clicking axe. So I want to add that functionality. The next piece of functionality I want to add is what's called cheat mode. I want to click on the robot head and go into cheat mode, where the robot wins every time. It does that by just looking at the player's choice and then choosing whatever beats the player's choice. Okay, so let's do this with test-driven development. Okay, super. So I'm here now, and what I am going to do is I am going to run the app. Yeah, I'm running the app, running with one warning. Oh, never mind. Okay, so here I'm going to set up my test or run jest in order to get this to work. So let's do this. npm run test. I'm just going to change how I do it now every time. Okay, super. So we've got the one test. It's the one test that we changed. Okay, what do I want to do? The first thing I want to do is I want to tidy up my app because, and I'm sure this has happened to you because it happens to me all the time. You get too many files in a folder and then you start having trouble finding the file, and pretty soon your life goes to heck. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder for this app.test.js. And this is the same app.test.js, by the way, that's created every time you do a run create app or create React app. This is created every time. It's just a little reminder that you should get started writing tests. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder something weird. __ test __. And I am going to grab my test file and put it back in there. And it failed. And why did it fail? It failed because it's importing app from the wrong location. So that is fine. So what I need to do is I need to do .. No, is it .. src? Hold on. Yeah, this happens to me too. Yeah, .. /. Should work, right? Yeah, there we go. Just needed to put another dot. Need to go one out of the test folder. I'm into the source folder, and that's where app.js is. Great. While we're looking at files, you may have also noticed that there's a setup tests.js. And if you have a look, it is importing something from testing library called jest.dom. So let's have a look. What is testing library, first of all? It's a very vaguely named thing. So I listened to a podcast where the guy who created this was interviewed, and he said, he was asked why he came up with the name testing library. And that's because he couldn't come up with a new name when he was coding it, and he just used testing library as sort of a stand-in, and then it just stuck. He never changed it. So this is why it's called testing library. So let's have a look. So testing library actually gives us a few things that helps us with testing. It gives us some ways to do matching. So let's look at some examples. Here's an example. So this is doing a find by, and it's going to look through all of this defined. This should look familiar to everyone. And there we go. So this is, this is the get by role, find by text, get by placeholder test from testing library /DOM. Right, so we are using this in order to find the elements within our app. And that's very important because we want to find elements. We're testing the front end, which means we want to find things and run tests to make sure that they are doing what we expect them to. Okay, yeah, here. Should have looked at this earlier, but there we go, find by test examples. And this is actually a great example of how we're going to set up a test. We use a describe block. You may have remembered describe from Mocha. It's the same thing. It is just a function that runs. The first parameter of that function is a string that explains the test to the person running the tests. And second is a callback that runs. And inside this callback, you can see here, we have this before each element. This is again, something that's added. I think this one's by Jest. And this is going to run before every single test. So it's going to create an element. It's going to render the content to that element. So it's going to create a div. Notice it's not adding it to the DOM. It's sort of floating in space, right? Because normally you would have to attach it to the DOM. Here, we don't need to. We're just rendering the one piece of data that we need. And then we run our tests. So here, we're using a user event, which is click. So we are having the user click on something, get by role, something that has a container of button and name of login. And here's our expectations. So we expect username required to be visible, password required to be visible. Right. So you can't log in without adding a username or password. And that is what this is testing. So this is what testing library gives. There's also, even deeper, there is the React here. I think if I just, there we go. React gives React specific matchers in order to make our lives even easier. This is inside Create React App by default. You don't have to add any of this. All right. Super. Oh, and watch Scott Zielinski. He's a fun guy. When you have time, you can watch his little video. All right, so before we used React testing library, we used a library called Enzyme, but that's a few years ago. This has become better, and Enzyme was by Facebook, the same as React. However, this isn't by Facebook, but everybody agrees that this is better than Enzyme, including the people who run Enzyme. So I think if you go to the Enzyme page, it says, go use React testing library instead. All right. Let's come back over here. Okay, so I've got my tests set up for the app.test.js. So let's open up helpers here. And I'm going to want to write some tests for a helper. Well, let's have a look at how the app works first of all. So I've got the app, has a header and a game. Okay, so here's the game. The game has some state, right? Comp selection is null, player selection is null, status is waiting, cheating is false. Okay, great. And we're passing the state to a component called computer. And we're also passing the state to a component called player. And then we've got this result, which is passing just the status, the weighting to this component, the result. So the computer component has no way of changing the state because we're not passing down any way for it. We're not passing down any functions, and using functions are the only way a child has of changing the state. So only the player can change the state, which is telling me that the computer has no way of changing the computer selection up here. Let's have a look at computer and see if I am right. Okay, see, emojis. They're perfectly valid to use emojis in your code. I don't recommend it, but you can. All right, so let's have a look. If we're cheating, it says exterminate. Okay, great. But this is all that's happening. This is a dumb component. It's receiving props. And the props are state, and it's pulling off the comp selection from the state. Okay, so when we start the app, the comp selection is nothing. So this is null, so none of these are being highlighted. Once I make a change to the player side, the computer side populates. So that means that the state has been updated. And we can have a look to see, and this must be updated then from the player component. Let's go into the player component and see how that works. Okay, so we've got Moai Axe tree. We've got those set as options. They're an array. We've got a couple of use effects. So this is going to run whenever player selection, comp selection, or set state changes. This is a little weird. It's not really going to change because set state is a function. But you need to pass it in because it is needed in here. And there we go. So this is going to set the state to the new status. So we're going to run this announce result function, and whatever comes out of that, we are going to set that in the state. This one is just going to make a change. Interesting. So if the player makes a selection, the computer selection is going to be Moai every single time. And it's just going to run the set state. So previous state, comp selection. And we only care about the player selection and set state. So if the player selection changes, run this use effect, which will have the computer select Moai. Okay, this is why the computer is losing all the time. Register player item. Okay. Okay, this is a function that takes this. We're going to run updater. Where's updater? Ooh, exciting. Go to definition of updater. Right. Updater is this function. So we're passing a function into this function, and then we're running it with updating the state. And then down here, we've got very similar items. We've got some buttons. Looks like we're being smart and just going through the options, which are up here. It's an array, so it's going to create a button 3 times with the choice. Okay. Let's have a look at the last thing is the result. And I haven't shown you the result, so, but I'll show you in a moment. This is actually making an Axios request. So this is actually making a request from an API server that exists somewhere. It exists right here. By the way, my JSON server, you can actually set up a a file and it will just serve it up as an API. It's a really cool service. So again, something to look up. So we're doing an Axios get. We're taking the promise and then we're using that to set high scores with the data. And if there's an error, we get the error. And the high scores, we're just mapping through them and giving the name and the points. Let's press the button and see if that works. Yep, it works. Not styled, but it works. By the way, Cairo Garrison is the coolest. That's like an Indiana Jones name. That is so cool. Cairo Garrison. I may change my name to that. I just need a bullwhip. No, I'd hurt myself with that. All right. So I've gone through the app. Is there anything about this app that confuses anyone?
Maybe could we just look at the helper functions? Like,
Yeah, actually, that is excellent. So the helper function, we've got this announce result. And if you remember, we had the announce result that was, we were using that, I think it was in the game or one of these. Player. There we go. We're importing the announce result. And this is where we're getting the result. We're running that with the player selection, the computer selection. So the helper is just, it's doing the lookup. And this is a little weird. We have an object here where the keys are one thing and the values are the thing that beats the key. So we're being kind of smart here. We're using an object with keys and values. So we can say, hey, what beats tree? And I could just say, look up tree, and it will give me back the answer, which is going to be Moai. Moai beats tree. No, tree beats Moai. There we go. Axe beats tree. That makes sense. Okay, and then it's doing a comparison. So if there's no comparison, it's going to wait. If the player selection equals the computer selection, sorry, the going through this this object literal, we're doing the lookup. We can see, oh, okay, if the player selection is on this side and the computer selection on that side, then the player has won, otherwise lost. Otherwise, so we're doing a switch without using a switch. I actually prefer to use this rather than switch statements. Switch isn't, but that's just my personal preference. Okay, here we go. We've got our feedback messages. So we just pass in a status and we get waiting one, lost, tied. Okay, this is where that notice at the bottom of our file goes, or yeah. Assign robot item. So we're doing the same sort of thing, except we're reversing on this side. We've got an if cheating. So this is kind of interesting. And fun, we got some options, random index, and we're returning here. There we go. Just going to return a random math.random out of this. So random index equals math.floor, math.random options length. Options length is 3, so it's going to choose one of these by default, right? Because this is either going to be 0, 1, or 2. Because options.length is 3. Okay. That was a very long explanation. So let's get started. Okay, so let's create a file. And I'm going to create a folder first. underscore underscore test underscore underscore. I like having my test files separate from everything else. And inside this, I'm going to create a helpers.test.js. All right. So let's get started. I could just go and copy things from the example that I had over here, but let's do it the right way. All right, so I want to create some tests for my helper. So let's think about what we need. We need to import some things. We need to import the things that we are going to test. We're going to do unit tests here. We're going to test individual functions. That's what a unit test is. A unit test makes sure that a function does what you expect it to. So if you want to test more than one function, like what is showing up, that's an integration test, and that's a little bit wider scope. So let's import. Let's start with announce result. And it's // helpers. Not that. All right. So I am pulling in announce result. Cool. All right. So does anybody remember what I needed, what everything is inside a Jest test? Same as for Mocha. What do I run first?
Describe goes first.
Yep, exactly. So let's describe. So I'm going to run the describe function. Jest is kind of cool in that you don't need to import it. When you run it, it looks for everything inside a test folder that has a .test.js extension and runs it. So let's test something. We're going to test the simplest thing possible. So simplest. I'm not sure if that's how you spell simplest, but whatever. I just want to make sure that Jest is working correctly. Okay, so the next parameter is a callback. And in this callback, what am I going to test? Well, what's the easiest thing I can think of? Well, I can think of, I want to test that true is true. That's as easy as it gets. So how do we write our tests? Let's go over to Jest. Okay. Ooh, animations. Oh, this is fun. All right, so let's have a look at the docs. Getting started, how to install it, great, but we don't need to do that because Great React App does it for us. And here it says test. Okay. Ooh. So we run something called expect. Again, remember, Mocha and Chai. And then we're running an extension called, or a method on that called to be. Okay, so let's give that a go. All right, so I expect true. And this, again, VS Code is great, tells you everything that you can pass it. So I'm going to say to be true. All right. And when I run it, one failed. Uh-oh. my test did not run. Let's see why it failed. Your test suite must contain at least one test. Oh, duh. I have to put this inside a test block. You can't run here. Let's just change describe to test for a second. There we go. You can have a test at the top level, but you can't have a describe at the top level. Things I learned today. All right, so let's actually just put the okay, and just take this test and we put it in here. Just tidy that up a bit. Okay, we run it again and it works. You may notice that it says test suites and tests. A suite is a file, or so a particular file. In this case, the suite is the helpers.test.js, and the individual tests will be here. So this test, simplest thing possible, expect true to be true. So that we can add another test. So let's add something. And what I'm going to do.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
So in the console, it's saying 2 tests passed. We just created 1 test, right? Or isn't
Right,
it-
but the other test is this one, the app.test.js that we created or that we fixed earlier. This is the default one that is added by Create React App. This is actually a useful test, right? You want to make sure that your app renders. And you don't want to necessarily run your app in order to know if it's going to render or not. So let's come back here. So what do we want to test? And I think here, I'm going to, all right. I'm going to actually look at this. So we're doing TDD, right? Test-driven development. Let's delete that. Right? It's going to break our app. Let's refresh. Waiting for your choice. Should have broken our app. Oh, it will break it if I click on save there. Okay, super. So I've broken the app. So what I want to do is create this function from scratch. And I'm also going to delete that function as well. All right, so we want for our app, we want to have the correct item or the winner or whoever won or tied to show up here in the DOM. All right, so how do we do that? So let's think about the test we want to write. We're going to write our test first. All right, so let's make another test. I'm going to test. You can also put it if you like to write your tests so that they read in English. It say it returns a valid item. Okay. All right. So we want it to return a valid item. So what are the valid items that it's going to return? it's going to return one of three things. It's going to return it's going to return either Moai, it's going to return Axe, or it's going to return tree. And let me just uppercase that. Okay. So what is the expectation here? We want to take the output of this announce result and make sure that the output is one of these three things. So in order to get the output, we're going to have to run it. So let's create a variable. So we're going to announce the result, and we are going to pass in okay. Announce result announces the result. So let's actually, I'm going to delete this because I'm a little bit confused. So we're going to test this actually. This is run in the game. So let's have a look at this. We've got some state. So we want to set up some state. So let's just grab the default state. And what I want to do is I want to set the state to a particular, I want to have it reset after every test. So let's create a variable because I want to be able to change it. Okay. And then we're going to run that before each. Okay, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this. There we go. So I am creating a variable called fake state. I'm then setting it before every test to the initial state. All right. So after this simplest thing possible, let's test something else. We want it to return all right, we want it to return 1 if the player is Axe and the computer is tree. So if I have an Axe, computer's a tree, I chop down the tree, I win. So let's add inner callback. And we want to expect that notes result. This is this helper that we are going to write. We do know we have to pass it in a player selection and a comp selection. So let's create a variable for the player selection. And it's going to be in the state. Okay. So actually, it doesn't need to be in the state. I'm just going to, let's just say player selection equals X. And comp selection equals tree. So if I pass in player selection, comp selection, we expect that to return so we are just going to unit test. Expect, oh, there we go. What did I break? Unexpected token. I
Oh,
expected.
you didn't declare the player selection and comp selection.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And still expect must have a corresponding matcher call. Expect. And then, oh, yeah, I see what's happening here. No, not that. There we go. Fantastic. And it's failed. It's failed because I deleted the function. So the pattern we're looking at here is red-green refactor. Okay, so we have a red test. So we can write some code in order to get that test to pass. Okay. Well, that was easy. Right? If I return 1, then it's going to work. But that's not really what we're doing as developers. We want to add some more functionality than that. So let's go back to the test file. And actually, one of the things I really love to do when writing tests, well, love is a strong word. I like just pulling the test file on one side and the file on the other side, just so I can move back and forth easily. All right, so let's add another couple of tests. And rather than make you watch me type, I'm gonna just pass in these tests and we'll go over them.
How is that fake state working?
The
in
fake
test?
state, it is just setting the fake state before every test. So I've got this fake state set up. And
Is it passing it in to the somewhere?
At this point, no. Well, it's passing it into the test. I'm just not accessing it.
Ah, okay.
This is more an example of when you would use it before each than something practical. All right, so I want to test tide if both choose X, and I want to return lost if I have X and Moai. Does it make sense for me to go through every combination?
No.
Yeah, I don't see any reason. We as long as we have a good way of defining which one beats which, it doesn't really matter which one goes where. So notice that here, let me just see, this is why it was doing setting the fake state. And actually, we can do that here. Just so they're all the same. And we'll note that you normally can't directly manipulate the state in a React app, but we're not manipulating the state in a React app. We're manipulating the state in just a regular JavaScript file. Or we're not using state here. We are just testing the individual functions, okay? So let's have a look. Great. I have my failed tests. 1, 2, 3. It is passing. Let's have a closer look at the failing tests. Okay. Expect received to be expected. And it received tied and or expected tied and received 1. Okay. Lost in 1. Waiting in 1. And the one that passed is the 1 out of 3 has to pass. Okay, so let's go and write our function. And once we write our function, we can take a break. So we don't want to return 1. We only want to return 1 in a particular circumstance. So the way that it was set up earlier, I could put a switch statement in. Let's do it. Let's do it with a switch. Except I've got a switch and I want to look at 2 different. I could look at player selection. Here, switch. Right, so it's going to base the output of each of these on what the player selected, because this is always going to be sent in with a player selection and a comp selection. So case, the case where equals acts. Okay, so what do we want to return if the player chooses an X? Well, we want to choose either 1 of 3, waiting, 1, or lost. Okay, so if comp selection equals I suppose I should uppercase everything because that's how they're being sent in. Then we want to return tied. Default, well, default, I guess we want to return waiting. And here's a little, if you're always returning, in this case, I'm returning waiting as the default, I don't need to put in my break statement in a switch. Okay, so if player selection is X and the computer selection is X, then we're tied if wanted to return we want to turn won or lost. I think we want to, if I have an X, and so we've lost, there we go. And I'm returning out of that. Okay, so I'm always going to return out of this case, so I don't need the break. All right, so if the player selection equals X, and the computer selection equals X, we want tied. If the computer selection is MOI, lost, otherwise return 1. We could actually make it a little bit more specific. I'll just say this. Here. I have to put my break back in, or else it gets unhappy. All right, not the most elegant of programming, but it should work. So let's save that. We've run our tests. Okay, we still have failed. And it's always returning waiting. Fascinating. Player selection, comp selection. So if player selection is X, return waiting. Oh, duh. I have to put in 2 more cases. That's why that's not working. Matter of fact, we have to put in the case for player is X, comp is tree, player is X. Why is it doing that? Right, because I've chosen player selection is X. When in doubt, always run a console log. So we want to run player selection.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I think with the case, you don't need to say player selection equals. It'll just match X to player selection.
You are correct. Let's save that. Oh man, Gottfried should be teaching this class. But there we go. That's exactly what the problem was. You see, I don't use switch statements very often. Okay, now this isn't going to cover everything, again, because the player selection is always has to be X. If it's not X, I'm going to have failing tests. Or actually, because the tests are all for X, this is always going to pass. Now, it's going to be better if I add the other 2 options. No, not that line. And okay, and then 3. Just copy and paste and then make changes. So if I've got a tree and the computer chooses Axe, we've lost. If we've won, if the computer chooses Moai and we have tree, and finally we have tied. And one. So this is going to cover everything that we want to cover with this particular function. I'm only testing this bit up here. So in actuality, it would make sense for me to add tests to cover all eventualities. But that would also make this file much longer. If a junior dev passed this to me, I would say put in more tests. Put in tests to cover everything. A, because I'm a jerk, and B, because really you want to test every single possibility. Tests are there to catch problems. And one of the things that I try and do, at least, every single bug that gets filed, I try and write a test that replicates the bug so that next time the bug occurs, we have a test that will catch it. So it shouldn't occur again. All right, my friends, let's take a 10-minute break. You guys have been heroes putting up with me for this long. Excuse me. Ooh, I'm sick. Excuse me too. I don't know. Hey. Hey. Thank you for being on time. All right. Isn't testing fun? get that endorphin hit, right? And when you do testing and you get all of this, like green makes me happy. Green's the happy color. Red's the unhappy color. All right, so we now have, and you can see down here, I was just checking it out. Yep, the correct entry is showing up every time I make a choice. However, our computer is always choosing Moai, so it's going to be really easy to win again. So let's create a function that will change that. All right, so let's think about it. How would we change this? Let's see where the Moai comes in. And yes, I know I chose, I believe, player state, set state. If I go into player, which one? Player. There we go. So the computer selection is always Moai here. And this is where we want to make a change. We want it, instead of Moai, we want it to be one of those three. So let's add some tests to check that, okay? So I'm gonna describe, snippets, by the way, save your life. Okay, so we're going to describe the assign robot. Okay, and in the callback, we're going to write a couple tests. So the first test I want to write is, or actually just one test. And that is, I want to make sure that it chooses, at least it responds with something. So remember earlier, I had this. So I expect, and const actual equals assign robot choice. Yes, I know it doesn't exist yet. I want it to be one of those. I want, right, actual is going to run this function that doesn't exist. And then I'm going to expect so I'm going to expect that the choice is somewhere in the options. There we go. Now, where did I get this to contain? This actually comes back to the one of these, the React testing library. Come on, matchers. Here. Oh no, it is inside here. Just includes its own matchers. So here it gives you some information on how to use the matchers, and we can actually gives you a million things here. Where are, I don't want to look at the intro. I want to look at the docs. Here we go. Using matchers. I was already here, wasn't I? Version expect API doc. There we go. Aha, this is what I'm looking for. So here is everything that I can expect. And now here are all the matchers. So I have to contain. So I expect I expect in my app. And there we go. So I expect when I run assign robot choice that I get something in this array. Okay, so let's create assign robot choice. So assign robot choice, we're going to put that in helpers as well. We're going to export it. Okay. And let's return something. Let's return MOI. OI. Okay, let's have a look. It's gonna, what's failed? Oh, something's failed. Assign robot choice, right? It doesn't know what assign robot choice is, so I need to import it. And I've run it. Perfect, it passes. Now, obviously, again, this is not how we want to do it. We want to choose one of the three. So let's set up recommendations. I want to choose one of three items in an array. I've said the word array, so we can actually just create our options. And I want to return one of those. Any ideas? TJ, this is the time I'm going to bug you. I promised you I would.
I wish you would have bugged me earlier when I was more on top.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay. So how do we choose a random number? We want to choose something random. How do we create randomness? Well, randomness is created with the math.random function. Okay, so math.random gives you a number somewhere between 0 and almost 1. So what we can do is we can multiply that by 3, or here where times options dot length, which is going to be 3, and then we want to round that off. So I want to round it down because I want 0, 1, or 2. So math dot floor. Okay, so that's going to provide me with a number between 0 and, or it's going to give me 0, 1, or 2. So I can say, and let's create a name, const index equals, there we go. And then I could say return options index. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Test pass, green. There we go. Awesome. So I have written a test that passes. This is, oh, I should put this in a test, shouldn't I ran into this problem before, didn't I? Oh my gosh. Let's fix that quickly. Okay, and it should return a valid item. Okay. Perfect. Test still passes. It's now 7 rather than 6 because it wasn't passing because I didn't put it inside the test block. So perfect. So let's actually hook up Assign Robot Choice into our app. So let's go over here. Let's come to player. Let's pull player over the side. And I'm just going to close that for a second. So I'm going to pull in announce result from helpers. And I'm also going to pull in Assign Robot Choice from helpers. Okay, and if I come all the way down here, where instead of MOI, what can I replace that string with?
The function.
Yep. And I have to invoke it. Okay, let's see if our game gets a little bit more interesting. All right, let's refresh, start from scratch. Good game to you. Choose your destiny. X. Oh, I was getting worried. I hit 3 and it chose the same thing 3 times in a row. It's never choosing. No, there we go. It's choosing the first one. Perfect. So it's now a real game. All right. What's the next thing I want to do? I've got a real game. All right, I'm not going to make my Angry Birds money off of it, admittedly, but it works. So I want to add the cheating mode. So I want to click on Robot Head here and go into cheating mode. So let's think about that. This is going to be a new test. It's going to be an integration test. And where I'm going to put this under game. All right, so here's the game. And close the helpers for the time being. So I've got this, the app test is here. So I'm going to put the game test in there. Okay. So we want to run integration tests here. And we also want to actually manipulate the page, right? Because we want to click on the robot head and make sure it turns or it goes into cheating mode. And the way we're going to have it go into cheating mode is we're going to give this a class of cheating. Okay, so I am going to, I need React because I'm actually going to do React things inside my test. Okay, I'm also going to need to have import game from slash game. Okay. And I'm also going to import something that will be determined later from the React testing library. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Okay, super. So let's write a test. Again, I'm going to write the test and then I'm going to implement it in the code. So test, I could put it in a describe block, but I'll just do it outside. So test should add the cheating. Let's put put it in state by clicking on RoboHead. Right. Super. So how am I going to do that? Well, I do need to do a couple of things. I need to set it up. I'm going to test the component in isolation. So I only need the game component. I don't need the entire React app. It's just the game component where the robot head lives. So I am going to have to render the single component, and I'm going to pull in render from the React testing library. Okay. And I'm going to destructure what I get out of it because I know I'm going to get okay. So I'm going to render the game. I get an object out of render game. Let's actually have a quick look at that object. Let's say const. Okay, let's just console.log that. Okay. And oh, I typoed. That's fine. It's just telling me it doesn't like using rendered there. Okay, so I've got a failing test. That makes sense. Cannot find module game. What? Oh, components. My bad. There. All right. So this is what I get out of that render function. I get a lot. So let's destructure out exactly what I need. Okay, so instead of render game, I'm going to destructure, I'm going to destructure something get by test ID. Okay. So test ID is a little bit odd. I am going to add to my app. I'm going to come here to the robot head. Matter of fact, I think it should be here already. And let's open up game in here. There. So I've got the game, okay. The computer is here, so let's go into computer. All right, and we've got there's the robot head there. And we've got this interesting attribute that we've put on this element. ARIA label is there for screen readers and such, because screen readers don't like emojis. But in the HTML5, we are able to attach data to individual elements by creating an attribute data.-something. We can make it whatever we want. I've actually used this several times in real life. So I want to attach a test ID so that I can access this element. Why don't I say image. Why don't I add a class? Well, classes and IDs, that might be someone else's department. I could add an ID to this element and do a get by ID, but in this case, I'm going to do a get by test ID just to show you how we can use it. So I've added this data-test ID to this element. So it's come back to the test. Okay, so that doesn't exist anymore. Let's console.log the, well, get by test element is actually test ID, I should say, is a function. So let's run that function. So I'm going to say const robo head equals get by test.
John, just a quick question when you have a second.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So in this case, the program was already written with that span containing the data test ID.
Yeah.
If we were writing this from scratch, or if we were even doing TDD ourselves, is this an element that we could add into our code to act like a class so that we can access it for later?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as a developer, you should always have access to the HTML because we're web developers. That's what HTML is. So you can add this. I should have removed this so that I could add it before the class. I missed removing this. So I was going to do the whole, hey, let's add a data-test ID, but I forgot to remove it. So let's pretend that someone else put that there.
Okay, and just to confirm, we would add that in so that we could specifically access it using Jest, whereas class name would not be something that we'd be able to.
Well, I could add a class, but this doesn't have a class. I could add an ID, but this doesn't have an ID. The least amount of interaction I can do is add a data dash something. So in this case, it's the data dash test ID, which is something that's built into Jest, and we can access. We can just add without, say, hurting anything. What if another developer comes in or a designer and adds different classes or changes IDs? That's going to screw us up. It's going to break our tests. But I guarantee you no designer will ever touch a data dash attribute on an element.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Great question. Okay, so I've created the robo head. So let's have a look at the robo head. Avoid destructuring queries from render results. All right, that's fine. Console.log, and we are going to console.log the robo head. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so here we've got the robo head. It's an HTML span element. That makes sense. It's a span. And okay, super. So now I've received a reference to it. Now I can actually run an event on it. So how do I run events? You might be asking yourself. Well, that's something else that we can do with the React testing library. We can grab the fire event function. Let's just comment that out. And we can say fire event. What event do I want to fire? I want to fire click, because that's what I want to do. What am I clicking? I'm clicking the robo head. All right. Super. So I've now clicked on it. So when I've clicked on it, I expect the RoboHead to have class cheating. Okay, awesome. So I've added this. Avoid destructuring queries from render result. Use screen. All right. That's fine. And I guess I'm going to need to import screen. Okay, still failing because the robo.
You've got an uppercase L in class to have class, line 13.
Thank you. I am Captain Typo. All right, super. So it's still failing because it doesn't have cheating. So let's create some functionality where we're going to add to the RoboHead. So let's go over to the RoboHead. And we've got some state here. Okay. So I'm going to want to tell the game.jsx that, well, let's make this easy, actually. Let's do class name equals. It feels like I'm cheating by adding that. Because again, it doesn't matter whether you click on it or not. It's going to have the class of cheating. Look, it's glowing red. If you're cheating, it's glowing red. All right, so yes, I am 6 years old. Okay, so let's, instead of putting that, we want to put cheating if something. So we want to create some state that is cheating. Matter of fact, if we go up a level to game, we see cheating is false. So what we want to do is we want to be able to change that cheating. How do we change state?
Set state.
You got it. How do I get set state to fire when I click on here?
You
What do I
pass it
need
as a
to do?
prop.
You got it. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing, computer and the player. We need set state in both locations. Okay, I am setting the state. So let's go back down to computer. I am now receiving the set state. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add an on-click handler. On-click equals, and this is pretty standard. I want it to run the handle quick function, which I haven't written yet. So let's do that. Okay, and all I want to do is set state, and I'm going to pop in the callback version of this. So run set state, and inside here, we're going to take the previous state curve state. HR. Okay, and we are going to manipulate that previous state. So we want to return a new object. Inside that object, we want to have state, and we want to override the cheating. So we just put cheating is going to equal the opposite okay, perfect. So when I click on this, we're going to handle the click. The handle click is going to run the set state. It's going to pull in the current state. It's going to look at it. It's going to reverse cheating, and it's going to write it back to the state. And that state lives in game. So now I want to set the class name to cheating only if the state is, so state dot cheating. Let's do it with a logical operator. So state dot cheating and cheating. All right, let's see if that worked. So, whoa, how cool is that? It also says exterminate when it's cheating. How cool is that? Okay. I'm going to, what else do I need to show you? I want to show you one other feature of Jest that is actually pretty awesome. So in theory, I can now add like the have it cheat. So I could just have it look at what the player chooses and then just choose the winning object, but I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to leave that as an exercise for the class. But what I am going to do is I'm going to show you another tool that is actually pretty great, and that is a coverage tool. Okay, what is coverage? You want to make sure that you are testing your app and testing everything that matters. You're never going to have 100% test coverage just because no one's got time for that. But we have a great tool. It's called Istanbul, but it's built into Jest, so you don't have to remember Istanbul or Constantinople. So what we can do is we can go to our package.json, and I'm going to add a new script. And I'm going to call this coverage. And the way we run coverage is we're going to run the test, but instead of passing verbose, we pass in coverage. Let me just make sure I'm not lying to you. All right, that should work. Oh, comma. All right, so I've created a new script to run. So let's run that script. And I do need to use npm run coverage. All right. So in the terminal, it goes through all of the files, and I should actually, when you run this, by the way, you shouldn't have your regular test runner running. So let me actually turn that off, just because it can interfere. So let me run this again. There. So now it shows the number of statements in all files that I have tests for, number of branches, and branches aren't like get branches. They're logical branches. So an if, that's a branch, right? So if do one thing, else do another. 50%, 56% of functions, 66% of lines, it even gives us line numbers. And now I love the terminal, as you're all aware. But for those of you who don't love the terminal, and I hope you do love the terminal one day, this actually creates a new folder called coverage. And if we come over here, open up the L coverage report, and then we can just open that with live server. And it gives us a pretty version, web-based version. So it creates that entire file for us. And again, we can have a look. Okay, so source has 66%. Let's go into there. Okay, app is fully covered. I don't have any tests at all for index.js. That actually makes sense because I'm not doing anything there. And that's one of those places where it makes sense. You don't need to write a test for index.js. It doesn't do anything really. I can go to the components and I could see computers fully covered, games fully covered. Now, covered means there's a test that covers that line of code. It doesn't mean it's a good test. You could still have bad tests, or you could still have incomplete tests. But this coverage tool is really a good tool to have a look at. I do look at this during my work hours just to see, okay, how good are our tests for this particular app? Oh, they're not very good. Well, we're going to have to write some tests. Or if you have some downtime, or not downtime, but time during a sprint where you don't have anything else to do, your engineering manager is almost certainly going to say, you should write some tests. So writing tests can be a little annoying, but nothing gives you that endorphin rush like seeing the green. 8 passed. See how good I feel? All right. Any questions?
So if you're writing tests after the fact to make more coverage, that's like the ideal situation is you're doing it before you even write the code, correct?
Test-driven development means you write your test and then write your code. But you may already have code that is there, and then you can do it the reverse way. Okay, so what is this function doing? How can I test this function in order to make sure it returns the correct information? And do what we call happy path and sad path testing. So test if everything goes well and it works, but what happens if you give it garbage? What happens if I give cactus to my function that's expecting moai tree axe? Will that ever happen? Probably not, but in a larger app where you've got different components written by different people, you may want to be more complete with your tests. Also, when you're looking for a job as a developer and you get given a coding assignment, write a test for it. That always impresses the interviewer. It impresses me when a junior writes a test when I'm interviewing them. So that's something that looks really good. It reflects well on you, that you know at least that you should be testing. Learning what to test, that's experience. Okay.
And John, also like, do we have like one test folder with all the?
No,
tests? What will-
you can have different test folders. So this is sort of up to you. Jess likes putting things in a test folder, and it will run anything inside that test folder. But maybe you want to run them outside the test folder. Maybe you want to have all your tests in a single folder. Maybe you want to have a single test folder for each component. That's a developer's choice.
So when we will run npm test, it will automatically check
will
the test file.
Yeah, it will find everything. It will look in everything with an __test__, and it will also look for anything that has a name .test.js in your source folder and run that as a test.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, my friends. Well, that was fun. No, it was fun. It was fun. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you all. I will see you next week. Feel free to Slack me if you have any questions. I'll get everything posted for tomorrow morning. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you
John.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.